Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. Hope we are doing well so far, and it's time to move on to another position in free agency. We're going to be taking a look at outside options to fill another very important position for the Seahawks in 2023. We're talking about the center position. As of right now, the Seahawks don't really have a center on the roster except for Joey Hunt. If the season started now, our center would either be Joey Hunt or Damian Lewis. Basically, we kind of don't have a center. Joey Hunt is a practice squad tier player. He does have a little bit of experience in the NFL, but there's no way he's going to be the guy. He might be a break glass in case of emergency kind of guy at some point, but there's no way we're going into 2023 thinking that he is the starter. And honestly, I think it's unlikely we're even thinking about him as the backup. And his contract is fully non-guaranteed. We can cut him anytime before the start of the season, and everything's going to be fine there. So let's take a look at some of the outside options. I've already talked about Blythe, and I briefly talked about Fuller in previous videos. We're not talking about those guys. We're talking about guys we can bring in from other teams, and there are actually some good options in free agency this year. So maybe this is finally the year where the Seahawks say, okay, we're going to have to invest heavily in the center position. So I'm going to go through the guys who you could get and plug in as an immediate starter if you got them. These are the guys who you would get, and you could immediately say, wow, that guy's better. That guy is clearly better than pretty much any rookie you could draft. If you get one of these guys, they're going to be your starter day one, almost certainly. It would take a bizarre training camp circumstance for anything else to happen. But it's going to cost some money, and we're going to talk about that as well. So with that being said, let's take a look at the list of center free agents. Keep in mind that center is a position where typically you will see at least one semi-high profile player get released before the offseason really gets underway. I don't know who it's going to be this offseason, but there's probably going to be someone out there who is pretty good who gets let go just because. So just keep in mind this list will probably get a little bigger before we actually get to free agency, but I couldn't give you a name. At one point, I thought maybe it was going to be Mitch Morse, but that doesn't seem like that's going to happen at this point. Buffalo still needs to try to find ways to stretch their cap and keep as much talent around as they can. I don't think letting Mitch Morse go is going to fix anything. So I'm kind of taking him off the table, but somebody is likely to shake free. Maybe in a trade as well, by the way. That's always possible. But the first free agent that I want to talk about here, and to me, the crown jewel of this free agency class, is Connor McGovern of the New York Jets. Connor McGovern of the New York Jets, he's about to turn 30. He's going to turn 30 right before the draft. This is a guy who's established himself as one of the better centers in the league over the last several years. Had a very solid 2022 campaign, played over 1,100 snaps, only had 4 penalties, 5 sacks allowed. PFF grade was very, very well-rounded, very, very solid, just shy of 70. And you can go back to previous years and you can see that he's still performing. The year before, he played almost 1,000 snaps, had a 76 PFF grade. Year before that, not as good, not as well-balanced for sure, but still not terrible. He still had some positive attributes. And you can see where this guy has developed into becoming a really good all-around center since he got on with the Jets. And he is going to cost some money, I can tell you that right now. This is probably the most expensive center in this class. I don't know if he's going to be as desirable as Corey Linsley was a couple years ago, but this is going to be the Corey Linsley of this class, of this free agent class. So Spotrac estimates 2 years, $25 million, so basically $12.5 million a year. And I think that's reasonable. That's basically what Linsley got per year. Just Linsley obviously had a much longer contract. So that's probably what it's going to cost about. You are losing a little bit in terms of ability from Corey Linsley. Linsley was an all-pro before he signed that contract with the Chargers. But McGovern is coming out in a free agency class where there's a lot more money to go around. So would not surprise me if he ends up commanding something like $12.5 million a year. Okay. The next guy I want to talk about is another really strong center in this class, Garrett Bradbury. This guy brings a lot of the same stuff that Connor McGovern does to the table. He's younger, though. He's going to turn 28 before the season starts, so he's a couple years younger. He's got a higher pedigree. He was a first-round pick, and he's coming off a year where he played pretty well. He played over 800 snaps and had a PFF grade of just over 70. Now, it was something of a career year for him. You can go back and see he was not as good in the previous season, and he's somebody who misses typically a game or two a year, but if you buy what he did in 2022 as being what he's capable of, if you don't think he was just kicking it into overdrive because of the contract year, you're getting a high-end center here. You're getting a very good, maybe even great center. And he fits the prototype of what I'm looking for in a center. Like Connor McGovern, he's about 300 pounds. He moves fairly well. Now, it's going to cost you, per year, it's going to cost you a little bit less than McGovern, but we're talking a $48 million contract. That's what Spotrac says anyway. 4 years, $48 million, just shy of $12 million a year. I think that he loses a little bit of average annual value because that was such a year where he was above his typical level of play, but he is younger. He is a former first-round pick. You add those things together, and you have a guy who really might cost, not going to cost as much per year, but he's going to want a longer-term contract because he knows he can get that longer-term deal and still get another good deal after this deal is over. So he gets to hit free agency again when he's about to turn 32. That's pretty good. So that's a high-end option as well. One other guy that I want to touch on here would be Bradley Bozeman, and I've talked about this guy a little bit before. This is a guy who didn't really get a lot of attention last year in free agency, which surprised me. He ended up in Carolina. He didn't have his best year. PFF grade was 63. He played less than 700 snaps, so he missed a good chunk. This is a player who is a little bit on the heavier side as far as centers go, which I'm not as big a fan of. I like the centers who are around 300, 305 pounds. I think it fits better for our system. And overall, there are some things here with Bradley Bozeman that kind of put me off a little bit. If you go back to 2021, you can see he played much better. He was played pretty much the full season, had better numbers, had better grades. Excuse me. So, I don't know. Bradley Bozeman theoretically should be in the prime of his career. He's not going to turn 29 until midway through the season. So I don't know why he had the off year. He was playing on a team that had a pretty powerful running game, and you can see that his numbers were significantly better in the area of run blocking. But I don't know. This one doesn't quite do it for me as much as the others. I think that Bradbury and McGovern are more desirable, especially when, if you believe Spotrac, it's going to cost you about the same amount of money. 3 years, $36 million, so you're looking at $12 million average annual value. So right in the same category as Bradbury and McGovern. I'd rather have those guys that are a little bit lighter. I feel like a little more reliable. I can trust them to have high level of play in at least 2023 more than I can Bozeman, because Bozeman's coming off a little bit of a down year. So it's an option, but after having a chance to really look at things and review things, I'm not as behind this one as I thought I might have been initially. But I have to talk about him because he is going to be one of the more desirable centers on the market this offseason. As you can see, the fact that he had a down year in Carolina this year hasn't really affected his projected market value. Spotrac still thinks he's going to get paid because he's been good in previous years. So don't be surprised if that happens. And that's kind of your big three free agent centers. There is Ethan Posick, who, I don't know how people would react if he came back. I don't. But I do think he fits the scheme okay. He did have an excellent year in Cleveland, played at basically a Pro Bowl level. I don't know what happened, but honestly, if we're being objective here, because everybody loved to dunk on Posick when he was here for some reason, people just hated that guy. I think it was because he looked so bad when he was playing at guard those first 3 years when we were playing him out of position. But Ethan Posick, this was kind of the path that he was on, if we're being honest here. Like you can see, he had great all-around grades in Cleveland. And if you go back the previous year to 2021, yeah, he wasn't nearly as good, but he was still headed in the right direction here. 67 overall grade in PFF. Now, obviously, there was an extreme split here, but he was headed that way. You go back to 2021, you can see the grade is okay. And you go back to previous years, the grade was really bad. So you can kind of see him working his way up. And last year was kind of the culmination of the progression that he's been having as a player. So the thing is, he was on a very good offensive line in Cleveland. He was playing next to a Joel Bitonio and I can't remember the name of the other guard, but it was really good interior offensive line. That helped him tremendously. And he's also a little injury prone. I mean, he only played 820 snaps last year, so he missed at least a couple games. He is relatively young, 27 and a half. He'll be 28 by the time the season starts. The thing that kind of holds me up here a little bit would be the fact that, according to Spotrac, if Spotrac is right here, he's going to command a long-term, fairly lucrative deal. 4 years, $29 million, $7.2 million a year. That's a lot of money for a guy who's really had one great season and is injury prone. And I don't know. I feel like I'll say this, if the Seahawks sign Ethan Posick to this contract when free agency starts, I think most fans are not going to be happy. Now, that doesn't make it bad. And based off the way he played last year, it definitely wouldn't be bad. But there are circumstantial things with Posick's play last year that has me not so sure about this one. So I'm interested, but I'm more interested in other solutions here. Real quick, Jason Kelce had a great year, stayed healthy, didn't allow any sacks. 89 PFF grade almost. He's had an incredible career. You can go back, and, he's always at the very least good, and often he's hyper elite like he was this year. Projected contract would be a 1-year, $12 million deal, which totally makes sense. If anything, you're getting a bargain. But I don't think he's going to leave Philly. I think he'd rather retire than leave Philly. So I'm not really going to talk about this one because it's not going to happen. So just wanted to briefly touch on that before I get to the final guy that I want to address here. This is a guy who's not going to be as high profile as these other centers. I don't think he's going to get the money that they get. There are problems with him, but this is kind of like the last guy in free agency right now who you could get and expect to reasonably plug him in as a starter and get reasonable results. Jake Brendel from the 49ers. So this guy is a little bit on the older side. He's going to turn 31 before the season starts, so you're probably looking at like a 1-year or 2-year deal. I don't think a player like him is going to command big bucks. You might even be able to get him for like 1 year, $5 million, because he's only really had one full season of playing in the NFL. Like 2022 was the first time he really got an extended look in live action. And he played the whole year, only allowed 1 sack at center for the Niners, but he committed a lot of penalties, a lot. So that was the main thing holding him back. His play was okay. He just couldn't stop committing penalties. Now, if you believe he can clean that up, I think you have something. This is a guy who is sub 300 pounds, moves pretty well for a center. 40 time was about 5 seconds flat. His overall PFF grade was solid. He was a good pass blocker and a plus run blocker. It's just really the penalties. The penalties are what killed Jake Brendel. So if you believe you can work that out of his game a little bit, if you think you can improve on that area, this is an opportunity to get somebody who's going to be relatively cheap. I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. Again, I'm saying something like 1 year, $5 million, 1 year, $6 million, something like that. And you might be able to get an actual like bargain here. The previous guys I was talking about would not be bargains because they're going to command pretty much everything that they can get based off their play in 2022. So Jake Brendel is a guy who really didn't get an opportunity to play hardly at all before 2022. He's got 1 year of credentials, and it was mixed. And I think that's enough to depress his value. The other centers we've talked about are going to get the big bucks. There's going to be limited amounts of money for Brendel, but he did all right. And he did do all right in San Fran's system, which is obviously going to put some people off. What I would say is that I don't think the guards in San Fran last year were very good. Aaron Banks and, I can't remember the name of the other guard, but those guys, I don't think they were that good. So it's not like he was getting carried by his supporting cast on the interior offensive line. So I think there's something here. This is like your budget starter option. This is like if you want to kick the can down the road again, if you want to just say, okay, we don't want to make a big investment in center yet, but we want to get somebody who we know is going to be a decent starter. This is your guy. And that's really all I see in free agency this year for starting quality centers. I'm going to talk more later today about some backup options. Hope to see you guys there. Go Hawks.